Well, hey, welcome back to another episode of InHaus podcast. It's actually the first episode of season 3, and today I'm joined by worship leader, songwriter, and artist Jon Guerra. Jon, thanks so much, man, for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Jon, fill me in, man. I know you recently moved to Texas, and you've been there for a little bit while now. What's life looking like?
Yeah, we moved to Texas in March of 2020, almost a year ago, and right before everything shut down. It's, obviously it was a wild year for everybody, but life is pretty simple. We have a 1-year-old baby girl, so kind of a lot of chasing her around. I'm writing still. I released a record. I'm producing for other people. I came down to Austin to work on a movie, music for a movie, and still doing that. And that's pretty much it. Kind of sticking around locally. Texas is a good place to be in a lockdown. It's pretty warm compared to where I came from in Chicago.
Yeah.
So,
how is COVID down there? Is it pretty tame, or are you guys?
It goes in waves, just like everywhere, I guess.
For sure.
It's been generally, relatively tame. There's been a few just weeks where I think everybody just kind of freaks out because it's
for sure.
It just spreads like wildfire for a while, and then it seems to kind of calm down.
Yeah.
But it's not so bad.
Yeah. Is it a lot different? Are you like, man, this is not Chicago. It's warm.
Well, definitely now, man. It's January 19th, and I went on a bike ride with my baby girl in a t-shirt.
Oh man.
And
that sounds awesome.
It was great. It was really, really. I know that I know I'm in a new place because I kind of now have nostalgia for the cold.
For sure.
I feel kind of like when I think of being shut in the snow, and I'm like, oh, but when you're living it, there's no nostalgia. It's just pure pain.
That's right. Man, it is full of snow over here. I'll tell you that much right now.
Is it?
It's crazy. It snows every day now.
And where are you again?
I'm in DeKalb, so
nice,
by like Aurora, that area.
Love it.
Yeah. So, dude, I've heard you describe yourself as more of a Monday morning devotional songwriter rather than a Sunday morning worship writer.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm biased, I got to say, like, some of your Sunday morning stuff is pretty fire.
Yeah, thank you.
but what is the heart behind that? Like, tell me a little bit about that. Why would you describe yourself that way?
I love, I'm a worship leader as well, and I love Sunday morning, and I think what we do on Sunday mornings is so necessary and crucial and important. We're singing, it's a body activity.
Yeah.
When we're together, it's something that kind of galvanizes the sense of community, and it's amazing. And then God receives that worship, but there's six other days in the week, where we don't gather, where we don't have the time or ability to kind of to really have that kind of worship experience. So, but yet Paul says, pray without ceasing, rejoice in all things. So what does that mean? Well, I found that art for me helps me to pray without ceasing, whether that's having a song running in my head, or whether that's a poem, or whether that's scripture or something. But and so when I say I write devotional music, I say I write music that's meant to kind of help us pay attention in the 6 days of the week. Because when you go to church, you have all sorts of aids to help you pay attention. You've got a nice building, you've got probably coffee, you've got people around you. It's just, conditions are great. But when you wake up on Monday morning and you don't want to wake up because you were maybe up too late, or maybe your kid wakes you up earlier than you wanted, or you really don't like your job, or you really don't like the way your life has turned out, what helps you pay attention then? And I try to write music that kind of helps people pay attention in that space.
Okay.
I kind of discovered, I've been a Christian for a good part of my life, and obviously that has meant different things as I've grown up and as that's sort of developed. And the last few years, prayer has really become something new for me. Paying attention to God, not only with my mind, not only with my intellect. I studied historical theology. I've read the Bible. I'm a big reader. I love reading.
Yeah.
I've loved studying the Bible for a long time. My dad's a pastor and a theologian, and but there's this Greek word that's nous, N-O-U-S, that basically just means the eyes of the heart, or the mind of the soul.
Yeah.
And I think prayer is our way of engaging with God, with the nous part of us, with the and when Paul says pray without ceasing, he's talking about that. He's saying whatever you're doing, washing the dishes, mundane things at home, or something at work, pray without ceasing. Be mindful of your life before God. And so I'm a devotional songwriter because I'm trying to be an aid to a life of devotion.
So good. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So, I guess, where did that passion start? Where did that desire start to write and to be involved in art? Like, where did your love for all that start? How did that come about?
Man, it pretty naturally. I think it always, my love for music was always a love for art. And when I was 12 years old, I went on a missions trip with church, and that's the first time I remember really being moved by worship music. 15 of us kids sitting in the basement of some dingy church basement. The youth pastor gets up with a Taylor guitar. There's no amplification. We're just, and he sings, and I just couldn't explain it. Something happened to me. And
it grabbed you right away.
It just grabbed me. And there was nothing, he wasn't a great, it wasn't the thing itself. It wasn't like the sum of its parts. It was, I now have language for it. It was an experience of grace, an experience of God. There's really no other way for me to explain how something so insignificant in the grand scheme of things could have such a significant impact on the trajectory of my entire life.
Yeah.
Because really, in many ways, I've just been chasing, chasing what I experienced kind of in that basement. And then I came home, started playing guitar, and just started listening to music that I liked, music that really moved me. And that gradually developed from MXPX and Switchfoot to Radiohead to classical music to, I've kind of like really, really dove in with my friends, especially in high school. And we just were passing bands around and, oh, have you heard this? Have you seen this? Oh my gosh, I just found this, Sigaros on The Late Show on YouTube. Like, you've got it. It's like a 9-minute song, and it's the most transgressive thing because it's super slow and it's super. It was just, I don't know, the way anybody gets into anything.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in Christianity, that we have a huge, a long lineage of artists and theology of art. So there was no shortage, especially where I grew up in a town called Wheaton, outside of Chicago. A lot of my youth leaders were Wheaton College students, and the pastors in my church were, getting their PhDs, and so they loved to talk shop about aesthetics and the transcendentals and truth, goodness, and beauty, and so it was a rich environment. Yeah,
and I guess along the same lines, we just got through a pandemic, or we're still in it, but it's kind of throwing us all for a loop. And I think it's left a lot of people like myself, like looking for like, all right, I want to be creative in this way, and I want to have motivation in this way. And so I guess with the world being in kind of like a different state now, where are you finding motivation from? I know, of course, scripture and stuff like that, but where are you finding motivation as you're continuing to write and continuing to produce music?
Well, sometimes I don't feel very motivated, truth be told. Sometimes I feel it feels very hopeless, and it feels very difficult to kind of continue on. But, and sometimes I don't. I try to be my process is very routine oriented. So I really rely on my time in the mornings before everybody gets, my wife and daughter, before they get up, that I don't know what I would do without that time. In fact, there would be no songs, because that's really when I write. And that's when that's kind of when I have my time with both with God and input and output. And so just the regularity of it, your body does respond to the regularity of rhythms, spiritually responds to it. And also, and this isn't something I've really been great at believing in my life, but actually I believe that I have something that I'm meant to contribute to the world. And I really believe you have something you're meant to contribute to the world. And I don't mean that in any large way. It's large for me because it's my life.
Right.
But I mean that the small contributions that I make each day in trying to let the rivers of living water flow through me to my family, to my friends, to my listeners, to the people at my church, that may be a small thing in terms of what's happening in the world, but for me that's everything. I mean that is Anne Lamott says how we spend our days is how we spend our life. Yeah. So I mean that is good. Kind of how I feel like I've got a song to write, and sometimes I feel embarrassed about that song. Yeah. Sometimes I feel pumped about that song. Sometimes I feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. In which case I have to do some probing as to, well, why am I annoyed with this process? Well, it's because probably I'm trying to please somebody other than God, because that's very exhausting for us. But yeah, mainly chase that. There's some things that are really hard. Like I've been trying to get into more video stuff. Yeah. And I just don't know anything about cameras, but I'm learning. And
like filming and editing?
Filming and editing, yeah.
Nice.
Just for fun. Yeah. And just because I think it'd be useful for, my music stuff and something I've wanted to do for a while. But it's hard, man. I don't and so that feels like a slog, but I guess I look back in my life and the times that I've put my hand to the plow of creativity and learning the grammar of a new form has always generally worked out okay for me. Yeah. Not that I've become whatever, but I've been able to utilize that for something really fruitful and fun for me. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to whenever I get good at camera stuff to be able to, I don't know,
use that in different outlets.
Yeah, I think so. And that kind of motivates me to keep learning when I'm like, oh my gosh, I just don't, how to turn raw footage, and I just don't have time. I don't want to look up another YouTube video on how to take the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema to it's like, but eventually it pays off. And I think, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 21.
21. So I'm 35.
Yeah. Okay.
So at this point in my life, I've had enough times where I've pushed past the resistance and seen the payoff on the other end that I can trust that when I do that, there's going to be a payoff. I'm sure you have too. I mean,
totally.
It's a lot of life.
Yeah. I think even starting this, right? Starting this podcast last year was there'd be times where I'm like, why am I doing this? What is the motivation behind this? And why is, there's days you're right where it's sluggish and it's slow. Yeah. And, you just got to push past that for sure. Yeah. And I guess, as believers, right, the gospel impacts every area of our life. It impacts the ways that we do things like podcast. It impacts the ways that we love others, care for others. So how would you say that the gospel influences the creative mind, and how do you draw kind of from the truth of what the gospel is to impact kind of your process, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, no, totally. I think all creativity at its best is an expression of freedom. Mm-hmm. And the gospel is really meant to set us free.
That's right.
And some of the best, most free artists haven't been Christians in the past. And there's a little bit of work to be done in figuring out why that is. And I think it's because a lot of times as Christians, we can affirm what I just said, that the gospel is made for freedom. But in terms of living that out and practicing that, and it becomes a lot more difficult because freedom is dangerous, right? Freedom doesn't really fit in boundaries. because freedom is, freedom isn't form necessarily. Form is what makes society run. Form is what makes our churches run. Form is what helps us be able to trust that when I go into a coffee shop, give them my money, I'm going to get coffee back, and that's going to be an interaction I can rely on. Freedom is something different, though, and we need both as human beings. And art, I think, is where we channel and express and play with our freedom.
Right.
And the degree to which I am not living by any sort of like man-imposed forms of what specifically like a life in pursuit of God and the love of God should look like. There's tremendous creativity there. There's tremendous, when I'm not thinking of trying to please man, I write better songs.
Right.
And the gospel really helps me and us not really be stuck into what I think naturally as people we get stuck in.
Yeah.
So that's how I'd say specifically the gospel. The good news.
Have you found like that fear of man? I think that's like super prevalent even in the churches today and stuff like that. Yeah. So I guess, is that something that you've kind of had to wrestle through in order to come to like,
for sure.
That the gospel is freedom, and I don't have to be, bound by these opinions. Like, I'm here for the Lord. I'm doing these things for the Lord. Is that something that you've definitely had to kind of walk through and wrestle through?
Yeah, no, for sure, man. For sure. I think, I grew up as a church kid, and I wanted to be a good church kid. And I rebelled in my own ways, but even when I was rebelling, I wanted to be approved of by the people I was rebelling with or rebelling towards.
For sure.
And I think the wild thing is actually the only free people are people whom Christ has set free. Like,
that's right.
There's actually no other kind of person. So even if people seem like they're free or they don't really give a crap, they're just, oh my gosh, like, that person's just so. Actually, I think there's a law at work, and Paul talks about this. There's a law at work in people conforming them to the patterns of this world, and that's in our members, he says. That's like in our bodies. And that's why through church history, one of the things that I loved about studying church history, there's these wild people that some traditions called saints, other traditions called church fathers or whatever.
Yeah.
They went out into the desert, prayed, copied down scripture, did wild things like owned nothing and tried to only, beg for their food and love their brothers and sisters. Like, they're these wild people, but they were free. They were, and that freedom always just, there's all these stories that follow some of these people like St. Francis or Anthony or, Martin Luther. Even some people might say he was a very free person. The Reformation wasn't sparked by somebody who was bound, was sparked by somebody who had discovered something. And I think he discovered the freedom of essentially, well, what is it, the freedom? It's the good news that Christ has set us free into what? Into the kingdom of God, which is available to us here and now. Well, what is the kingdom of God? Kingdom of God is the divine reality that is surging beneath every single molecule of this universe. It is the fabric of every single interpersonal relationship that we experience. We can either see them as somebody within the fabric of the kingdom of God, or we could see them as who they are by the world's standards. Yeah. This is a very freeing thing. It's like I could go meet somebody and I size them up by what they're wearing, by how much money it seems that they make based on their car, based on whatever it is, based on the gait, their accent when they talk, whatever it is. We're all just projecting sometimes things. But the kingdom of God says, no, actually you can approach that person with dignity, which is worth that has no substitute. You can approach that person as if you were approaching Christ himself, because you might actually be approaching Christ himself. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty. Like Christ actually identifies with other people sometimes in surprising ways. And that's very freeing. I mean, are you kidding me? I can walk outside right now and I don't have to just be like, I just don't have to look at people through the tired grid of status or whatever. I can look at people through the grid of this is a person that's, immortal. This person is going to live forever. And God actually, has a plan for this person and loves this person and sees them with infinite curiosity,
Yeah.
I think freedom is the gospel opens us up to that kind of freedom, that kind of living in the world.
Yeah. And I think, even from just hearing what you've been saying, I'm thinking about, in April, right? You dropped Keeper of Days, and that just came out, and it came out in a very timely season. I think it was right after the pandemic, became kind of this huge deal. And, one thing that, and I'm not just saying this, one thing that I just love about your music is it's real, it's genuine. You're not like pulling any punches. It's just real. And arguably the greatest album of 2020, I would say. And
thank you, man.
I really
That's
do mean
sweet.
that.
That's sweet of you, man.
So talk to me about it. I mean, I could ask a million different questions about this album. It was real. And what was kind of I know you started writing it probably before all this stuff came out, but as you were writing it, was there stuff that was going on, the pandemic and stuff that was kind of, I want to change this, or I want to do this, or I want this album to kind of say this,
Yeah. No, man, it all kind of was done and ready to roll before COVID hit. So that was one of those experiences that it did seem like it was pretty timely for a lot of people, and it's something I could have never planned because it took years it was years in the making. Yeah. And my process with art and with my songs and my music is really to, I guess, trust the process. Let the work tell me what it wants to be. Mm-hmm. I think to make great work, you have to be really good at not being in control all the time.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we look at art and we think, oh, what a masterpiece or something, like this is, how did they have the vision for this whole thing? It's like, well, the vision doesn't come all at once. It's like one little thing comes and then one thing comes and one thing comes, and then you have all these little things, and how do these things put together, and then you go away from it, come back, and you keep So really, it was a process of chasing the inspiration and chasing what it felt like it needed to be and what it felt like it wanted to be. And what I think that was, what it seemed to me it wanted to be, was basically like an assistant to prayer and a little flower from the garden of prayer. Yeah. And something that I didn't want anything to feel forced. I didn't want anything to feel too aggressive. I wanted it to feel inevitable. Like, oh, that note needed to be there because that note, where else would that note be? And of course, that's an elusive feeling. It's an elusive, but I feel like I hit it with a few songs. Then I started kind of finding it with others, and through the course of a few years, it felt like it was done. So
yeah, was there like a favorite song on that album that you specifically had that you were like, man, this is, I'm feeling this song,
Yeah. Well, I would say there's probably two. The first song that came out was, or that I wrote for the album, was Citizens. Yeah. So when I wrote that song, I knew I had a new album because I thought, I've never written anything like this before in my life, and I think this is what I'm meant to say, and this is a bit of I guess a gold standard that I want to hit with the other songs on the record. And then the second one would be the last track, the title track, Keeper of Days, because that was the last one that I wrote for the album, actually. Yeah. And I wrote it here in Austin. I came to visit my friend February 2019, and my wife was going to visit her sister, who at the time was living in Spain. And we had found out maybe a week before we left that she was pregnant with our first daughter. So she goes to Spain. I come to Austin to visit my friend and had a few days with him. He has an upright piano in his apartment. And while he was at work, I was just thinking about how life was going to change.
Yeah.
There's other things going on in my life too, both with church and my community, that made it feel like a season was coming to a close and another season was starting.
For sure.
We knew we were maybe going to move to Austin, so that felt like it was changing. Chicago to Austin.
Yeah.
Our old church, leaving that church, and then having a baby girl. So it felt like closing of a season, beginning, and it felt like, I think the season of this album, which I'd been working on kind of in secret for 3 years, was coming to a close. And when I wrote that song, I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the last song. And I think this is the title track. So that one feels especially special to me.
It's awesome. It's so good. And I think, I've recently started writing music, and it's something that I've been a worship leader, and I'm a worship leader intern here at my church now. And
nice.
It's just, my dad also is a pastor, and so I actually started leading worship for his church in
Nice.
2010 as a 12-year-old. And
Nice.
So it was just like, it's something I feel like the Lord has definitely called me to. And, through the pandemic, I've kind of been like, all right, I want to start writing stuff, because I feel like the Lord is just continually giving me these ideas and these things that I want to say. And so what would you say to young songwriters, to new songwriters? And I guess alongside that, what is something that you wish someone would have told you when you were first starting out? What is something you wish you would have known?
Well, I guess I would say two things. To be a writer and to be a songwriter is the most fun thing I can think of.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. You never get good enough where you suddenly are like, I'm good. I can stop learning. It's something you always develop, because you're really what you're doing is it's an experiment with time. Because a song comes from you, and you are always changing because you're getting older.
Yeah.
And what you love changes, and what you wear changes, and what you want changes, who your friends are changes. And songs are kind of birthed from that ever morphing random set of factors that make up our lives.
Yeah.
So it's really fun. It's also really, really hard, because songs are so small, and they're so simple, and there's not a lot you can do with the form before it starts to not be a song anymore.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like playing darts. It's like the bullseye can sometimes be a little narrow, and the bullseye for you isn't the same bullseye for somebody else.
Right.
And so figuring out what that is can take time, and you have to be patient with yourself and with your process. Because sometimes your stuff comes out and it sounds a lot like a million other people's, and it's cool, but it's cool because you feel like it sounds like somebody else's music, and and you feel somehow associated. But really, I think God calls songwriters not to be derivative of other songwriters. He calls songwriters to be exclusively devoted to Him, and to be and to be completely devoted to Him. Not even half, just like He wants. The nudge to write songs is really the nudge to seek God creatively. Yeah. So I would say it's so fun. It's very hard, and I would say also, I guess that last, just be patient with yourself as you're growing, and don't stop, because really all you have is progress. There is no perfection. Perfection does not exist with songwriting. Yeah. But keep writing and keep making progress, and pay attention to how people respond to it, but don't take that too much to heart. Go after what you know is right, what you know you're capable of, what you know you're called to. Yeah. And then if somebody was just starting out, it's really hard, man. When I was younger, I felt it was just, it was very hard to get to the bottom of my own motives.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but the prayer, search me and know me, God. See if there be any crooked way in me. Like, what is a crooked way? Well, it's a way that's not actually going where you think it's going.
Yeah.
I think sometimes our ambitions, we think they're going this way, and so we want God to bless them and baptize them because we think our ambitions are going this way, but in fact, our ambitions are crooked. We actually want this for other reasons.
Yeah.
And anytime I've followed kind of crooked ambition, whether that was to be seen as somebody special or talented, or whether that was to be famous, or I don't know, anytime there was something, and we're always mixed motives. I've always never knowingly thought to myself, I'm going to do this because I think I'm going to really benefit from this. I always thought I'm living as pure as I can. But then you look back and you're like, actually, if I was really living pure, I don't think it would have I don't think it would have. And that's okay. Just be honest with yourself, and God already sees it, and He's already forgiven it. He already has grace for it, But I would just say the sooner you come to terms with that, the sooner you will find and reach, I guess, the joy of what your calling is really meant to be. I sometimes remember when I was at my old church, there'd be a lot of young worship leaders that would come up, and their goal was to, they really, really, really wanted to be a worship pastor at a church one day.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's amazing. But the problem with that is, well, one day you just might be a worship pastor at a church, and then what?
Yeah, and then there's always something else.
Well, yeah, and then it's like, is it done? It's like,
yeah.
I think the goal should always be, God, I want to have ears to hear what you want from me. I want to have the boldness and the courage to do what I believe you are calling me to do. And I just want to follow you. I just want to trust Jesus. And that's it. And if that means a worship leader at a church, great. Sweet. I'll do that until God tells me not to, or unless He tells me to die on the platform. Sweet.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I think we start chasing these other things. And it's like, we're not meant to chase that. We're meant to chase God. And in the process of chasing God, we find ourselves with things to do, like leading worship, like, for me, making music for a movie and producing.
Yeah.
Did I plan it? No, of course I didn't plan. I certainly did not plan this. I was a church kid, dad is a pastor, led worship and youth group, went to college, studied the Bible. Like, my life is just, and God has kind of forced my hand in some ways.
Yeah.
And I've also led worship pretty much every year since I was 12 or 13. And that's been an amazing thing too. But yeah, that's what I would say to somebody who's maybe starting out with those ambitions.
Yeah, because do you think it was always a battle I guess starting out, was it hard to find, I want to be who the Lord's called me to be, right? And I want my sound to be my sound. Because I feel like it's easy to be like, John wrote this really cool song, and now I'm going to write a song that sounds like that. Was it a battle to kind of find your own
for sure.
sound and your own voice and your own, this is who I am and this is who the Lord's calling me to be?
Definitely, man.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, there was so much that the whole be devoted, not derivative.
Yeah.
That's just because that's what I lived. I tried so hard in high school to sound like Radiohead. I tried to sing like the lead singer of Muse and Rufus Wainwright, and then when I was leading worship, I tried to write songs like Chris Tomlin, or I tried to write songs like, Hillsong.
Yeah.
And it was in failing at doing all those things that I realized what I wish and I hope some people can realize without failing at that, is that there's actually something else for me.
Yeah.
There's actually something way better for me than trying and failing at being this other thing. And again, I'm it's like I sometimes I speak out of the two sides of my mouth, but I think that's sort of what Scripture does sometimes. I think it's very loudly saying, do this or else. And then I think it's very loudly saying, even if you do, there's grace for that. Like when Jesus is talking to the rich young ruler, and he goes away sad because he doesn't want to give away his possessions. And then disciples say, well, who can be saved?
Yeah.
It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to be saved. Well, who can be saved then? This is impossible, what you're saying to me. Who can make great art then? This is impossible. Well, with man, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible. Yeah. So I think it's both and. It's like, certainly with if it was just you and I trying to figure it out, man, it would be impossible. But with God, I think in His grace, in His leading, He leads us to those places.
That's right. And I guess along that too, like, what are who are some artists and worship leaders that have kind of, I guess, helped you find your style, if any,
Yeah. I feel definitely, man, so indebted. I was really, really obsessed with Bob Dylan in college. His use of language was so rich. Musically, some of those bands I mentioned, that's all still in me. Like Radiohead, Rufus Wainwright, some classical music. I really, really loved, probably like 7, 8 years ago, poetry began to be very important to me. And I discovered this poet through a friend, this poet named George Herbert, who was a 17th century Anglican priest at a very small parish in England. And he wrote poems in his, I guess at night or before his family woke up or something, because he didn't publish any poems in his lifetime. When he died, he had a stack of poetry that before he died, he had his wife mail to his best friend, and his best friend read them, and his friend published them after he had died. And there's some of the most incredible poems you will ever read. Some of them are a little tough and archaic, but the spirit in them are astounding. The style is amazing. And it just makes you ask the question, what kind of person would write a poem like this?
Yeah.
I want to be that kind of person,
Yeah.
And that spirit and that whole just is been very impactful to me, and something that I've been wanting to channel. There's also another poet named Robert Lax, who is a similar kind of guy who died in the late 90s, who was lived on Patmos in Greece. And he wrote these very spare, kind of minimalist poems, but there's something just really bright about them. And those people really generally inspire me. For sure.
It's good. And then, with another thing with the pandemic and, things getting canceled and changed, it's January now. And so what does 2021, I guess, look like for you? What are you growing in? What are you working on? What is the Lord teaching you? And what is...
man, no, we're hoping for some more, I guess, concerts and touring this year.
For sure.
Things are still hesitant with bookings. I think people are really hesitant, but I'm eager to do that again. I'm writing quite a bit still, so I think there's going to be another record sooner than later, and it's very different. I wrote all these songs with the baby girl who took her a while to learn how to sleep, so there wasn't much of that happening in our house. We moved. We're in a pandemic. We are away from family, away from our community, building good community here, but it was transition. So the songs are different. There's different things to experience and to write about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be hopefully. Well, we'll see if I'll be recording at least quite a bit.
Okay.
I'm producing for some other artists this year. I've been working with this guy named Judah. This female artist in Australia named Tennille Netta. Some other Australian artists and worship bands. Still working on this movie. Man, that's pretty much it. Kind of the same as last year, but hopefully a little bit less little bit less COVID, hopefully.
Yeah. Because were you planning on touring and doing like a big tour, and then
totally
did that kind of get pulled out from under you?
It got pulled out. Yep. Yeah. Pulled out.
Man.
We were planning a whole year's worth of stuff. And it was a blessing, truly. Like, I wouldn't trade the year with my daughter and wife in Texas for anything. Not for a million billion shows.
For sure.
So I was grateful for it. I'm excited to get back though and connect with people over the songs live.
Yeah, that'll be sweet. Mm-hmm. What has that been like? I guess you're right. You have a daughter now, and what has the Lord been teaching you as you've been kind of a family man now? You've got a new daughter and a wife. What's the Lord teaching you in that?
I love that question. I guess he's teaching me that, kind of along the lines of vocation, he's teaching me that he never stops teaching us.
Yeah.
My vocation for a long time was very much centered around what I could produce and put out for the world.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe my vocation. Now, I would still describe it as that, but that is secondary to really like holiness by way of loving my family. I mean, that's truly the thing that I think I'm called to in life, is to be holy by way of Valerie and Winslow in the confines of this little house in Texas.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is wild, because that feels very new to me, thinking of myself as a father, but he's been teaching me that there's actually, sometimes he wires us for things even before we know we're wired for it. And I've loved being Winslow's dad so much, and I've loved just being a dad. And
yeah,
I mean, I just had no idea how much I would love it. So that's kind of the main lesson these days, is both the joys and the lessons of fatherhood and family life.
And I guess also, so back to kind of the worship idea, right? It's changing. I feel like the way, as far as like the styles, there's so many artists. So I guess, what excites you about worship today, and is there anything that like concerns you, or you're like, I might do that differently, or
I probably would have had an answer to that last year or 2 years. I'm kind of what I'm realizing, God is taking care of his church.
That's right.
And so no, there's not really, sure, maybe there's some stuff I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I just feel right. I just feel very called and going in the direction of, holiness, through living in holiness in art. And other things don't really make as much sense to me when I feel something is like worshipful, but also a little bit cool. Or it's like when I start to sniff out things that don't feel just like totally, I get a little cranky.
For sure.
But what excites me is, I guess what excites me is kind of meeting people like you and other people who are maybe just a little bit behind me, and who really do love, who really want to be holy as well. It's not enough just to be the cool worship leader. It's like we want, and you want, at least I found.
Yeah.
There's a hunger and a thirst for righteousness in God, and a closeness to God that feels just so right. And that's very exciting to me, because where there's that hunger for God and for holiness, I think God responds and gives freedom, the freedom that we were talking about. And where there's freedom it's like, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what it's going to be?
Totally. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And then finally, I have to ask, I'm a big coffee Coffee's
Nice.
like my favorite thing in the world, and
Nice.
that's kind of something I've even picked up in the last year.
Nice.
And so you spent so much of your life in the city, and maybe it's not here, maybe it's in Austin, but where is the best place to get like a good cup of coffee? What is like your favorite place, and what's that order?
Oh, dude. So, oh my gosh, Chicago is something
The
else.
greatest city in the world.
I will say this. I think it could be. I really do think it could be. I would say the best cup of coffee in Chicago is probably just whatever kind of lighter African roast that Dark Matter is selling. So Dark Matter, I'm sure you know their beans. They're just
for sure.
insanely fantastic. They have a few shops in Chicago where you can walk in and it's basically just a roastery that you could then get a coffee from. You're never gonna go wrong with that. But out of nostalgia, I gotta say Intelligentsia.
Oh, so good.
Intelligentsia is still, I know they've become kind of the big conglomerate in Chicago and whatever, but that was my first cup of coffee was at Intelligentsia because I had a friend who worked there from church. I went over there and he, boom, just gave it to me. And it was actually Intelligentsia mocha because I didn't like coffee. Yeah,
did you have to drink it, with sweetener and stuff like that?
I had to drink. I did only do mochas for a while because I wasn't. Yeah. And then I moved to coffee, and now I'm with you, man. There's nothing, but even just walking into the Intelligentsia on Randolph in Michigan, it feels like heaven and paradise. It just and nostalgia and youth and I just drink the coffee in the cups and the way too cool for school baristas who just can't, they can't smile to save their life. They're just too serious about their coffee. I love it all, man. Just like be intense about your thing. I'm into it.
Has that become like an art form for you in any form or
so
fashion?
It did. Yeah, I mean, in art form as much as, just being very fastidious about my Chemex. Yeah. And, measuring and grinding and just making sure it is what it needs to be. Right. My friend who worked at Intelligentsia taught me how to, taught me how to do what they do at Intelli. And so beyond that, I haven't really, I had a cousin-in-law who was into roasting and never quite got that far. I really like that there's coffee clubs now that you can, like subscription base. I was a member of Mustache Coffee Club for a bit, and the beans there were outrageously good. I like the rhythm of making a Chemex, though. Again, speaking of the family life thing, we now just have a drip machine because it's path of least resistance in the morning. Oh yeah, and it's cheaper to just get drip. Yeah. So, and I like that too. I had a drip coffee machine in my studio in Chicago before we moved, and it was just for in a pinch, and totally. And there's something about that too, man. Just the diner, give me that diner cup with dark black. Yeah, I'm here for all of it.
I'm not a big dark roast fan. I got to be honest. Yeah, I'm more of a medium and a light roast. It's kind of the way to do it. Are you okay? Finally, are you against the Starbucks and the Dunkins and are you like that? Is not at all.
I am so done with elitism of any kind. Okay. No, I'm all about all of those. Every gradient of things. I think, I think Dunkin' Donuts is a gift to humanity. I think Starbucks is a gift to road trips and touring because my wife and I, we've given Starbucks a lot of our money on tour. I will say that. I don't
want to know how much I've spent at Starbucks. That's every Sunday morning. My first stop is the Starbucks drive-through before I even go to church. Yep.
No, the bacon Gouda sandwich. Yeah. So good, dude. Totally. So good. And if Intelli was open earlier, and if it wasn't so expensive, it'd probably be there. But Starbucks is boop, 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 boop.
Oh yeah. We actually have my friends opened up a shop here in DeKalb, and they actually have their coffee is Intelligentsia, and so it's so accessible, and I am so thankful. I really am. Sick, man. it is a gift from the Lord for sure.
It is, totally. It's just the small things, but we got to have them, especially on the way to church. The rhythm of going, I remember I lived in the north side of Chicago, and I would have to drive down Lakeshore Drive by the lake to go to the Cathedral campus downtown Chicago.
Right.
Pass by the Starbucks, just get my order, tall blonde, and just as the sun was rising, seeing the cathedral, getting warm, or seeing the sunrise over the lake.
Yeah.
Having the coffee go down, knowing I'm going to see some friends at church. I mean, it was just...
There's no feeling like that.
No.
It is the best thing. It really is.
It really, yeah.
And Starbucks blonde roast is the only way to go. So
totally, bro.
I totally agree with you.
There's a Starbucks in Chicago that is right on Oak Street and... Oh, my streets are escaping me. It's right in the Gold Coast, essentially, right downtown. And it's a double-decker Starbucks. And on the second floor, they have it's like their Starbucks Reserve or whatever.
Yeah, were you?
And it was.
Yeah.
Do you have one now too?
We have downtown Chicago. There's the roastery.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So that's the huge one. So there's one that's kind of like the roastery, but it's like in telly quality stuff.
Oh yeah, it's not a normal Starbucks.
No.
At all.
And there's a fireplace, and there's super comfy chairs, and there's everybody doing homework and doing. And that was one of my favorite spots too. You just go up there, you sit by the fire, everyone's got their laptop on, you get like an insanely good cup of who the heck knows what.
It's true.
It's just,
I miss that. I really do. Because it's like Chicago's just completely closed now. There's, but.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's the worst. But John, thank you so much for
my
coming
pleasure,
on.
John.
Thank you for being a part of this. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, man.
So,
thanks for asking.
All right, well, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on a new episode of InHaus. Thank you.